Hello and welcome to Safety Tavern's video on site hazard assessments. Again, just a reminder, this is a 1926 focused channel, which is OSHA 1926. Let's get right into it. Which hazards do we have to be trained on and train those under us on? Just my company hazards? Subcontractor, other trades related hazards? General contractor related hazards? Public safety hazards? The answer is all of them. All hazards. All hazards that our employees could have to come into contact with, we have to train them on. As an employee, all hazards you could come into contact with, you have to be trained on, as much as we can predict. All hazards. The answer is all hazards. General Duty Clause 5.1a. Each employer shall furnish to each of his employees employment in a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm to his employees. Now we're going to skip down to B. Each employee shall comply with occupational safety and health standards and all rules, regulations, and orders issued pursuant to this act which are applicable to his own actions and conduct. This 5.1a is all over these training videos, and the reason that we're going to keep going over them over and over and over again is because 5.1a needs to be hammered into our minds. If there is not a specific regulation that covers a specific hazard and how an employer or employee is to respond to that hazard, then 5.1a is kind of your catch-all. 5.1a is saying if there's something that can hurt your people, like really hurt your people, not like a wasp, but really, really hurt your people, then we need to do something about it. But wait a minute. I just said not like a wasp. Aren't there like killer wasps that are moving into America? This is everything. Anything that could hurt our people that we can reasonably predict, we need to deal with it. That's 5.1a. Good to go? Now, employees. If your supervisor is telling you, I want you to wear this PPE to protect you, wear the PPE. There's a new thing that's been coming around, and I've been in construction 20 years, so it's been in the last like 15 years of that 20, that employees, well, I don't want to wear that. This is your job. Your job is to wear this PPE. Your job is to protect yourself. Your job is to do what your supervisor says. And if your supervisor is trying to give you PPE to wear to protect you from a specific thing, it's not your choice to say, I don't want to wear that. Now, if it's unsafe to wear that, okay. If it doesn't fit, okay. You and your supervisor need to come up with some other solution, because I just don't want to wear it just because. That ain't going to work. That's not how this works. You have a job. You're being paid to perform the work as well as to wear specific personal protective equipment products. Your employer can get into a lot of trouble if they don't protect you. You can get into trouble if you don't protect yourself. Everybody wants to go home at the end of the day the exact same way that they came in, maybe a little richer, but the exact same way with all the same fingers and toes. Wear the personal protective equipment and take the safe, proper measures that are being recommended that you need to protect yourself. It's pretty simple. 1926-21 Bravo, Employer Responsibilities. 1926-21 Bravo 1. The employer should avail himself of the safety and health training programs the Secretary provides. This is talking about the Secretary of Labor. This is talking about OSHA. This is talking about everything that's been put out by the Secretary of Labor the employer needs to look at. 1926-21 Bravo 2. The employer shall instruct each employee in the recognition and avoidance of unsafe conditions and the regulations applicable to his work environment to control or eliminate any hazards or other exposure to illness or injury. All hazards. Again, just remember all hazards. We can break down each and every regulation and go, well, is this a hazard or is it not? In the end, can it hurt our people? That is the rule of thumb. Can it hurt our people? I'm talking about equipment hazards, chemical hazards, fire hazards, slip, trips, and falls hazards, all hazards, animal hazards. There's no, if you put the word hazard at the back of it, you need to train your people on it. How do we deal with this? How do we deal with that? How do we deal with this? All hazards. Take care of your people. 1926-21 Bravo 3. Employees required to handle or use poisons, caustics, or other harmful substances shall be instructed regarding the safe handling and use and be made aware of the potential hazards, personal hygiene, and personal protective measures required. 1926-21 Bravo 5. Employees required to handle or use flammable liquids, gases, or toxic materials shall be instructed in the safe handling and use of these materials and made aware of the specific requirements contained in subparts D, F, and other applicable subparts of this part. Pretty simple, man. If they're using chemicals, any kind of chemical, they need to be trained on it. Whether it's liquid, solid form, gaseous form, if it is not a natural breathing air kind of thing, if it's a chemical, they need to be trained on how to handle it properly by you. That doesn't mean, well, they got training 10 years ago, or, well, I mean, you need to be training them. You are their supervisor. You are the person that tells them how to do the work. You're the one telling them, I want 15 pieces of conduit installed from here to here. I want this wall, I want it completely drywall. You're the one giving them instruction, supervisor. You're the one that needs to be instructing them. Employees, if your supervisor tells you, wear this PPE when you're conducting it like this, wash the cans out over at this place, not over here. Don't throw the spray paint can that's completely wet. Don't throw that in the trash, because that's literally an OSHA violation. If your supervisor is telling you these kind of things to protect you, to protect the company, to protect the general public, you must comply. 1926-21 Bravo 4. In job site areas where harmful plants or animals are present, employees who may be exposed shall be instructed regarding the potential hazards and how to avoid injury and the first aid procedures to be used in the event of injury. I cannot tell you how many times I've had a supervisor call me from the field and say, well, we're taking blah, blah, blah up to the hospital. Well, granted, he didn't say blah, blah, he said his name, but yeah, we're taking Bob. We're taking Bob up to the hospital. And I'm like, okay, why? What happened? Is he okay? He's like, yeah, he's okay. He got stung by a bee. I'm like, okay. Now, just to call a timeout real quick, bees are all over our job sites. They're all over our planet. They're in all 50 states as far as I know of, the United States. They're all over the place. How do we not get stung by bees? Does anybody know? I can tell you there's 3 main ways to not get stung by bees. 1, don't have your trash cans with lids popped off of them. That's pretty simple. Bees love to get they love sugar, if you will, and they know that the trash right there usually has a source of sugar because it normally has Coke cans, soda products, and they love to get in there. That's 1. Keep your trash cans covered up. 2, no open containers. It's a pretty simple rule. If you set it on your job site or you set it for your employees, no open containers. If you are an employee and if you pop that top, you know what I mean? Pop a top, not beer. We're on the job site. But if you pop the top of your Coke, set it down, put something on top of it. Do you like drinking bees? Yes, I have had an employee who went to the clinic because he got stung on his tongue by a bee, and he had to go home for the rest of the day. And I couldn't imagine the amount of pain because he took a drink of that bee and it stung him on his tongue. Cover up your drinks. Understand that bees are one of those things that they only come around when they know food's around. There are some that'll randomly wander into our areas, but for the most part, they don't want to mess with you. But your sugar yield is much higher from a can of Coke than it is from a flower. It's easier work for them. Now, employers, I've taken on the bee issue. What you're going to have to do is you're going to actually have to enforce it. I told you, keep your trash cans covered up. Okay, who's responsible for emptying the trash cans? Who's responsible for the trash cans? Who uses the trash cans? Keep them covered up. Have people who are going around checking all the trash. If you're a GC, have people going around checking all the trash cans. Tie the lids to the trash can. I don't mean tie them closed, but tie them to where the lids can't fly away. Have enough trash cans to where they don't get filled. There's a million solutions for this here. I've taken on the bees issue for the most part, and that'll deal with a lot of the issues you're having on the job sites with bees. These are the same kind of things that we need to deal with in regards to spiders, snakes, random rabid animals, coyotes. I don't know where you're working or what situation you're working in, but this is wildlife, man. What wildlife is on your job site? There was one place that we had that was I worked in. We had a bat population. That's right, and it was the Texas state marsupial or flying mammal or whatever a bat is. It was the Texas state thing. So I couldn't even kill the thing if I wanted to because it was protected. That's a crime against Texas, and I ain't committing a crime against Texas. So we had to come up with, first we talked to the pest control, and we had to come up with some rules for our employees on that job site. If there is a hazard that is reasonable to be expected, deal with it. Train your people on how to deal with it. Train them, never touch if you can't see it. Don't just stick your hands under that pallet. There's going to be creepy crawlers down there. If you got to stick your hands down there, where are your gloves at? And then look at your gloves. How many spiders did you pick up? These are basic things but time and again, I'll ask my supervisor, okay, he got bit by a spider. Yes. And I'll say, okay, did he have any training on how to prevent spider bites? What? Well, that's just obvious. Really? Because he got bit by a spider. So if it's obvious, why did it happen? This is where a lot of supervisors get into places that they can't justify themselves. And that is whenever they throw out the excuse of obvious or common sense. There is no such thing. OSHA does not over here. You're not seeing any regulations that say expect employees to use common sense. One of the safeties that I trained, very, very brilliant man, he commonly had a phrase, and he didn't create it, but he just used it all the time. Common sense is not that common, and it's not. You are being told as an employer to train your people on the wildlife hazards that they're going to come into contact with. Train them. Let's do a little practical application right here. This is a picture I took on a job site, and what's the hazard here? Yep, you can see it. It's called a fall. And if you count the steps, and even if you say that they're 6 inch, that's at least a 4 foot. And in all honesty, it was actually closer to about a 10-foot fall right off that porch. That's a fall hazard. So the question is, how do we train our people to deal with it? Well, you can either do fall protection, or you can isolate the area if you're a GC. If you're a subcontractor and that's not your responsibility, okay, but you need to train your people to where they understand they can't go over there. You need to have a conversation with them, and I'd put it in writing to where you say the GC has left all the porches exposed and there is an 8-foot fall there, and I don't want none of us are to go anywhere near those porches. Stay away from those porches. Here's another picture that I took on a job site, and at first glance, it looks like a pretty normal situation, but I'm from Texas, and back in the 80s, yes, I'm a product of the 80s. In the 80s, we had a little insect that taught us about electrical safety. It's a general public service announcement kind of thing, and his name was Louie the Lightning Bug, and he had a little catchy song. You got to stay away from power lines. It was a catchy little song, and in that, he would tell us we need to stay 10 feet away from power lines, right? That's as a general protection. Just stay away from the power lines. Now, again, we look at this picture, and when I took this picture, there was somebody actually up on the roof doing some random work. You think they're 10 feet away from the power lines? I don't. I didn't. And they were working on the Connex. And this is one of those things where if you're the electrical group and your GC lands a Connex right next to the electrical power lines, you might want to say something to them. If you're the GC, you might want to say something about, whoa, there's power lines right there. We need to look up. Don't just look at the ground. Look up. Can't tell how many times I've been on a job site and there's cranes flying stuff. Look up. Look all around you. Not just hazards on the ground. Hazards all over. Again, this is site hazard assessment, not just work area assessment, site hazard assessments. What are all the hazards you as an employee are going to deal with? As a supervisor, what are all the hazards your employees are going to have to deal with? As an owner, what are all the, as a GC, what are all the, again, it doesn't matter which situation we put in, what role you're playing, what are all the hazards? And then we need to talk to our people about it. Now, we had a gang box. This is a project with the company that I was at once. We had a gang box, and in order to get to our gang box, we had to go through this. This is called walk and rebar, and it's pretty common practice. You got to do it sometimes, but here's the weirdness. You had to go through this rebar, down a wooden ladder, and right next to the wooden ladder, they were flying metal. They were moving pieces of material up right next to the ladder, and then we had to go down this dark hallway to get to our gang box. Do you see all the hazards that we have to get to just to get to our gang box from where we were working? Oh, I forgot my wrench. There's a whole nother line of hazards that employee is going to have to be exposed to just to go get his wrench. Up, lunchtime. Up, go back through all the hazards. Lay out your job, your task, your components, your everything as best you can. There are some situations where, man, we just can't do anything about it. And I get it. We're just going to have to deal with the situation as best we can. This was insanity. Why would we throw our gang box in a dark hole that we have to climb down a ladder and up a ladder? You're going to tell me we're not going to climb that ladder carrying materials? Come on now. Plan out your tasks. Plan out your routes. I understand that's a good flat concrete place to put your gang box, but we shouldn't be doing this as a go back and forth to the gang box kind of situation. Site hazard assessments. Plan your routes out. Plan for your people. As an employee, plan for yourself. Don't make a bunch of trips. A bunch of trips is going to make, and I ain't saying do the opposite where you carry everything to where you can't even see over what you're doing. What I'm talking about is planning your site out. Okay, in the morning we're going to come, we're going to get our tools, we're going to move them up here. We're going to work all day, and then, of course, we're going to take our government mandated break. We're going to work all day, and then we're going to turn around and we're going to move our gang box back down into a more secure area at the end of the day. Plan your stuff out, guys. Plan it out. These are Hilti Strips. That's the common term for them. What they are is they are pretty much a 22 caliber bullet without the projectile, right? It's a bullet without the projectile. And then what happens is you slide up this into a tool, or you install it into a machine, and the back of it gets penetrated, and there's a tiny explosion, a little tiny 22 caliber version of an explosion, and all of the air is forced into, and all of that explosive force, whether it's air, fire, whatever, all of that explosive force is forced into a projectile that is attached to the gun, and you install, whether it's rivets or it is studs or it is screw-in spikes, or you install this stuff into concrete. This is a very common thing to see on a job site. Well, as you can see here, these aren't all exploded. So I'm sitting here with 22 caliber bullets just sitting on the ground. Now, on this job site, we were the electricians. And as the electricians, we don't do this. Now, I have been with some companies that did it. But as this group, we aren't the ones that are using these Hilti Strips. We aren't the ones leaving 22 calibers rounds sitting all around the place. This wasn't us. And this is one of those things where other contractors can create hazards that you, as an employer, have to train your people on. Just because, well, that's not my job. No. But you're the one sending, as an employer, you're the one sending your people into the area. If there is a hazard in the area, you must train your people on how to deal with it. Now, how did we train our people on this? Well, pretty simple. When you see it, you need to tell the GC, and we stay away from the area. Pretty simple. Now, if it's all over the job site, you might, as a company or as an employer, you might want to consider, do we really want to work for this GC? Because at some point, someone's going to get hurt. Because if they're leaving 22 caliber rounds all over the place, what else are they doing? Are they flying loads over people's heads without telling anyone? Are they... I've seen some really bad GCs, and I've seen some really horrible sites. And don't be that group. Don't be that group. Impalement hazard. Here's another one. Everybody knows when I say impalement hazard, everyone thinks of nails. But in the residential world, this happens all the time. See all those impalement hazards right there? That's right. And now, let me ask you a question. If we're going to argue about impalement hazards, now I can pull out regulations and letters of interpretation from OSHA, and we can get into a minutiae with measurements and all kinds of... We could. But let me ask you this. If you and I were standing right there, and I pushed you over, I literally pushed you over, and you fell on those, would those penetrate your body? And the answer is yes. Okay. If those penetrated your body, could they cause a pretty bad injury or death? And the answer is yes. That's called impalement. Okay, there is no question whether these are impalement hazard. They are definitely impalement hazard. Now, I'm not trying to slam the GC that I found this situation on. It's just a common thing in residential. So how do we deal with it? Well, I can tell you if my crews were working in the area, I would tell you have two choices. Either one, we turn down the work. Well, we have three technically. Either one, we turn down the work. That's possible. Two, we tell the GC that they need to do something about it. You need to put 2x4s up all around them. That's possible too. Or three, when we move into the area, the first thing we do is we cover them with 2x4s. And we have very special 4x4s that already have holes drilled. You could stick those on. You could cover them up with pieces of wood. Granted, there would have to be some maneuvering of it, because you can't just stick a piece of wood on it and be like, it's good to go. It needs to be to where if you fall on it, it's not going to penetrate you, right? That's dealing with it. There's also mushroom caps. Make sure that you're getting the ones that are rated for impalement, not just regular mushroom caps. These mushroom caps are rated are to keep you from cutting yourself on the top. These mushroom caps are not rated for impalement protection. These are not, and you can tell whenever you're purchasing them right here. Site hazard assessment. What are all the hazards on the site that you as an employee are going to deal with, that you as a supervisor are going to have your employees around, or that you as a company are creating or allowing to be around your employees? Site hazard assessment. Romex Rope. This is called Romex Rope. Romex Rope is when you take a piece of Romex and you cut a little chunk of it, right? You got a little extra, and you use it as rope. Is that what that Romex is intended for? That's the first issue. Second one, there's a piece of wire in there, and that wire is pretty sharp. And if you've never cut your hand on wire, well, it's probably because you haven't dealt with wire very long. I know a lot of companies that have moved to a mandatory gloves policy on their job sites, especially with mobile crews, work crews. Man, I see this all the time. What is the hazard here? Well, but that's on my truck. That's not the site. Well, if you have a mobile crew, you're a mobile site. You are the site. Where you go while you're in that company truck, you are the site. This is absolutely unacceptable. Get some rope, regular old rope, or at least get something without a piece of metal in it that's going to tear up. Get something that's designed to be rope. Rope is rope. This is not rope. This is Romex. Got it? So we've covered who needs to be trained. We've covered what they need to be trained on. But now let's look at when do we train our employees on site hazard recognition and mitigation. Mitigation meaning how do they handle the situation? When they first show up to the site on the first day, in the first few minutes before they actually go to work. I cannot tell you how many times I've had it. Remember, I didn't start out at safety. I had a whole bunch of different groups of jobs that I did in the construction world, and I have a really weird background. But I can't tell how many times I've shown up to a site and somebody's told me, "Hey, just go on out there to do some work, and I'll come give you a briefing at lunchtime when I have time." That's what my supervisor told me. I'm like, "Oh, okay." I look back now and I'm like, "What are you doing? You cannot send people out onto the job site. You can have them sit in the trailer, sit in the Connex. You can have them sit in the parking lot. But until you actually have the conversations with them of don't do this, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this, do this. Until you actually start having those conversations with them, you are putting people on a job site that are not trained. Employees. Just because you came from one job site doesn't mean the next job site is going to have the exact same hazards. Pay attention to your supervisors when you get to a new job site, what they're telling you. Pay attention to the new hazards that you're dealing with. 2, when they have demonstrated that their previous knowledge is not enough or was not utilized. 3, when they transfer to a new site. 4, when the site's hazards change. 5, when the tasks change that creates new or eliminates old hazards. Pretty much anytime anything changes on the job site that adds to, modifies, or reduces hazards, you need to talk to your people as a supervisor. Employees, pay attention to what is going on around you. Don't just look on the ground. Because you know how many times I've had people come in with a head injury and I'm like, "What happened?" "Well, I was walking, I was looking down." Come on, man. Like, really? You're looking at your whole visibility is right here and you're going to be looking down there. Now, don't get me wrong. Keep an eye on what's down there, keep an eye on what's up there, and keep an eye on what's ahead of you. But you walk into a metal pole because you're not paying attention? Now, could we have moved that metal pole? Maybe. Maybe it was another trade that put it there. I mean, who knows? I can't tell you the situation, but pay attention to what you're doing. Site hazard assessments. You need to be running an internal site hazard assessment at all times on a job site. I'm telling you. Safety Tavern right here, right now is telling you, you employees need to be doing a 100% at all times site hazard assessment. How am I going to do this? How's it going to hurt me? Plan it out. Plan out what you're going to do. I'm going to walk from here to there. Now, granted, we do most of it in our minds really quickly, but you need to take a couple extra seconds and think about what you're doing. Keep your mind on you. Keep your head on a swivel. Keep your head on a swivel. Don't just look down. You're going to walk right into that crap. Site hazard assessments. Overall, if there's a hazard on your job site that your employees are going to have to deal with it, supervisors, tell your people. Talk to them about it. Don't expect that some previous supervisor talked to you. Have the conversation with them. That way you know that they've been trained on it. I strongly recommend you document it down. There's toolbox topics that have pieces of paper. Go get you just a regular piece of paper and write down everything that you're talking about. Write down the date, have your people sign it. That way it's clear. No, I trained him on it. I talked to him about it. Here's what we talked about. There's all kinds of really good literature out there that you can print off, bring it out to the job site, read that to them, or have them read it. And if you're in Texas, we have a very, very mixed culture. And I love our mixed culture. But sometimes it's hard because we have guys who speak Spanish and they don't speak very much English. And one of the ways that you can get something across like that, hazard assessments, it's pretty simple. Print it off in Spanish. There's a million different toolbox topics that are in English and in Spanish. I hope this video finds you well, and I'll see you in the next video.